Oh, no, it wouldn't be a lender, but he could go to his bank and get a verification of funds letter from his investment broker or whatever. So it just means institution, right? Financial institution, yeah. So the next one is that there is a contingency on cash, and if there is a contingency, there are some options here. So the first one is sale of buyer's property located at. So if they fill this in and say this is like at 123 Main Street in Denver, Colorado, I would add as much as I could fit in here, such as in escrow, closing on, give a date. In escrow, inspection approved, closing on. And that's not going to fit on here. So I'm going to say CQ for more information. The more I can make the seller feel comfortable with a contingency, the more likely they're going to be to accept it. If I say it's contingent on the sale of my property at 123 Main Street in Denver, and nothing else, I'm going to go, well, is it listed? Is it in escrow? What's the status of this property, right? So now you're just generating questions and concerns. So in order not to have that, give as much information as you can. So then it says, okay, if you've got this house that you've got to sell here, now it says, buyer shall provide evidence that is satisfactory to the seller of buyer's ability to obtain the balance of down payment or balance of purchase price of cash within blank days of acceptance. So if we were doing a contingency on cash funds based on a house that's going to close in 3 weeks, how many days do you think you'd put here?
60.
All right, let me read you the sentence again. Buyer shall provide evidence that is satisfactory to the seller of buyer's ability to obtain the balance. What do I want to know? I'm the seller and you're asking me, and I want to make sure that you've got this $300,000 coming or whatever it is. How do I demonstrate my ability to do that?
Attach the listing?
The listing is a good one. How about the tax record? And maybe a copy of a preliminary closing statement, which is going to show my mortgage payoff and the fact that I'm going to net $300,000 out of this sale. See where I'm going? All you have to do is demonstrate the ability to get it. You can't, if you say to me, this is closing in 60 days, so wait 60 days. No. Now I'm just believing your dream. Give me some evidence that you're actually going to be able to do that, right?
5 days.
Yeah, 5 days, 7 days, right? Something to let me pull that information together. And
But if you attached it with your offer, that would be just as
would be
good.
even better. Yeah, it would make the seller feel that much better, right? Yeah. I give the name of the escrow company or the realtor so that they can call the realtor and find out where is it at, and just verify, just do a, verification for themselves. So whatever you can provide here. So that's how you fill that out. All right. Now the financing contingency is H3, that's marked, and this really says that the seller understands the buyer is making this offer contingent upon their ability to get a loan, okay? And they agree to apply for the loan and blah, blah, blah. And then H4 on the top of page 6 are the due dates that are associated with that loan commitment. And the first one says that we are going to provide a pre-qualification letter within 5 days from acceptance. And then it has these little pukas here. That is with or without review of income supporting documentation. So now that's a question that I need to ask of the lender. Did you verify their income? Have you got that yet? And he goes, no, I haven't got that yet. I'm like, okay, fine. It's a pre-qualification letter without income verification. You can see it would be stronger if your client had provided more proof, right? What's proof of income verification?
Pay stub.
Pay stub. Keep those pay stubs, at least the most recent ones or whatever. Another one is closing statements. So if you've had closings as a realtor, keep that DA, right? Keep your escrow instructions. It says you're gonna get this amount of commission and your broker signed it, right? Those are evidence for us of our income. And then you can show your bank deposits and say, see these 2 deposits, those are closed escrows. So that's why it's a little tricky for us, because the lenders see these big deposits and then big deposit, and sometimes they're not so big and sometimes they're really big. You know, they vary, and they go, what is this deposit? And you go, here's the closing. I need proof of that. Okay, well, sometimes the easiest way to prove it is the MLS listing that shows you as the buyer's agent. So when it's closed, that gets really easy, but then they want to say, I need more than that, and now you need something with the broker's signature, and that would be your escrow instructions, and your DA would have that information. So good to know. All right, the second puka then says the buyer is obligated to deliver to seller by blank days from acceptance a conditional loan commitment letter based upon underwriting approval and review of the property appraisal. This is kind of important. People sneak in, when you're the listing agent, they sneak in pre-approvals or pre-qualifications or conditional loan approval that doesn't have the appraisal done yet. That is not in compliance with the contract. So technically that buyer is out of contract, has not delivered on time and needs to extend. And does this happen? Yeah, it does. How does this happen? Sometimes some lenders aren't on it so quickly with appraisers, or, you know, some lenders are better than others, and it's always about service, right? Regardless of, you want good service from your lender, so ask around for good lenders. So how do we fill this in? Unfortunately, this is another date field. So in order to put a number of days here from acceptance, we're gonna go there and it's gonna give us this date field. If I hit the space bar, I get the date. I now have to blank this out, and now I go 25 days after acceptance. And then final loan approval, in this instance, we want final loan approval by when? 30, we're going 30, 56, we're at 56. So this actually needs to be 20 days after acceptance, doesn't it? And we didn't make our...
Can you say why that you went to 20 from 25? Sorry.
Because we have this 21-day requirement by the seller.
Thank you.
To move out after loan approval. Remember that one, right?
Yes.
So how do we do that? We make sure that it all works, right? So if I can get the loan approval 20 days after acceptance, and then final loan approval 10 days later.
Is that where it says 8?
Where it says 8, I'm gonna turn it into 10, right? That takes me to 30 days. I add my 21, right? Now I'm at 51, that gives us the 5 days to our 56-day closing. Right? So that we have to figure this out. This is our job. You have to make sure this all works. And it's the whole closing process ends up depending on these due dates of the loan. Here's another one that comes up a lot. See if I can get this into the screen here. And that is what happens if we want to take over a tenant. Let's say there's no HANA on this property. So we are here at day 1, right? And we've got X number of days here. Here's what happens. We've got a 14-day inspection period. On the 15th day, the seller says, I will give notice to my tenant when you approve your inspection. So now, how long do you have to give a tenant notice?
45.
45. 15 plus 45 is 60, right? So this is tenant out. And then what do we need here to get to close? Needs to be cleaned. I don't trust that tenant. Right? I need to do an inspection, right? The buyer needs to inspect that property, that portion of the property. And now you go to final signing, and now you go to final documents, etc. So you probably need 6 days here. So I would write it as a 66-day closing. So now my loan has to fit in there. I could get preliminary loan approval at 21 days, and I could get final loan approval, you know, or make this 30 days. You can make this one 30 days, and then 15 days later at 45 days is the loan approval, and now you've got 20 days here. And again, your lender is going to see these timelines, right? But you want to talk to them. So you see the value of talking to a lender and saying, when do you want to give me, when do you want these to happen, so that, because we've got to have a 66-day closing. What? Why? Well, there's a tenant that we're going to kick out, so we need to, oh, okay, fine. All right, and they'll tell you how many days before closing they want to give conditional loan approval and final loan approval. So it's at, a person can lock their loan at the time that they apply for the loan, or at the time that they get conditional loan approval. Anywhere in there are opportunities to lock their loan. The loan lock is what costs money to extend, and loan locks tend to be for 30 days. So we have to kind of remember that sometimes when we go to extend a contract and the lender says, whoa, this is gonna cost money. What do you mean it's gonna cost money, right? So you gotta keep the loan lock in mind when you go to extend contracts.
And you have to talk to the lender before you submit the offer, so you can fill this out?
Yeah, that was on our sheet on what to do before we write an offer, right? Is to speak to the lender and review timing and get accurate pre-approval, right? So now you say, well, Marion, if we got an accurate pre-approval, why is there another pre-qualification letter here? Well, the reason is that, what if we negotiated? We made our offer at $675, and Chris Musto comes back and says $710, and we go, okay, $685, and she comes back and says, okay, $7, and we go, okay, $690, and she comes back and says $7, and our buyer says, okay, we'll take it at $7, right? Consider ourselves lucky. We could have had to pay $725, and now we've got that $25,000 to fix the ceiling. Right? Look at it that way. So now I need a pre-qualification letter or pre-approval letter for $700,000. That's what's due here. It's great to offer the one with the contract, with the offer made out for $675, but the seller needs to know that they can in fact get approved for $700. Okay. I've made you go on and on. Anybody need a quick break?
I'd like.
Yeah, go. Let's take a couple of minutes.
Where are you from? I think you're Southern Mass.
You're very perceptive. I'm from
Well,
Knoxville, Tennessee. How about
Oh,
you?
my sister lives in Chattanooga. I
My
went,
sister's in
No,
Raleigh.
back.
Yeah, my uncle was in Chattanooga till
oh,
recently.
I love Chattanooga.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
Yeah.
No, where are you from?
Well, I'm from St. Louis, but I went to Ole
All the
Miss.
stuff she said
Okay,
needs to be filled out.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
that's an
Chattanooga,
interesting choice. What was your
well,
Probably us.
Yeah.
it's a long story, but when I went to summer camp, I went south, and all my counselors went to Ole Miss,
Right.
and my mom didn't go to college, so
Like,
Ole Miss was the only school, and it was cheap.
Yeah,
You know,
wow.
25 years ago,
Yeah, I
it was
know.
$4,000 for out of state.
That's amazing, right? I paid $25 a credit at the University of Texas.
Yeah,
You know,
it's so
nowadays
cheap.
it's $250 or something.
Yeah, I wonder what it is now.
So far. I didn't, I know she said your name, I didn't catch.
Oh, I'm Erin.
Erin, nice to meet you.
Yeah, what's your name?
Carol. Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, well, how'd you get here?
I lived in Austin, Texas, and met who is now my husband, and we were looking for a new place to live, and we didn't realize it because his wife had died of cancer, and I think he was just ready to move on. You know, and so
Yeah.
we came here on vacation and decided not to take our flight home and just lived in vacation rentals for 2 years until we could save up enough money to buy a house.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, how about you? How did you get here?
Well, I met my husband in DC, but he grew up here.
Okay.
And so we decided to move back here a couple years ago.
Oh, I bet that's so joyous, you know?
Yes, it is. It's easy living.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I know that everybody says it's so expensive. It feels exactly like Portland and Austin. you know?
Well,
I
it's
think
funny
that
because it's
helps.
like your quality of life
Yeah,
and the cost, values like somehow equal out.
yeah.
So like even though Chattanooga is cheap, well, it's just strip malls and good old
There's
boys
this
and
gorgeous, what, lake or river or something?
yeah, the
That's
Chattanooga,
beautiful.
it's like the Tennessee River, and then but then in the winter it's like cold and drizzly and no leaves and you're inside.
So here you get 360 days of gorgeous,
Yeah.
and then you have to contend with the
I know, it's just-
price
it's
of,
like-
you know.
Exactly. Like even that like piece of crap house.
Yeah,
I would live in it.
yeah,
You
oh
know,
my
'cause
God, it looks like
it's
a
a beautiful
palace to me.
I know. I know we do.
Where did you land on that? What part of it?
Well, we live in Kula.
Okay, oh nice, it's chilly up there, I can't do
No, it
it.
was 60 degrees this morning.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice, yeah, I live in Haiku next to Hanzawa store, I don't know if you've ever been that deep in
Yeah, my
Haiku.
sister-in-law lives on Hogback.
Oh, okay, yeah, oh, we lived in a house, beautiful area. We're on Kapalua, on the way toward Hana Highway, but just kinda halfway,
Oh,
and
that's nice.
it's so quiet, it's so lovely, yeah. We have a friend looking for a place to put her goats. If you know any neighbors if she wants a long term, she makes cheese. And she got evicted from where she was because they sold the house.
Well, I'll ask my landlord because he has ag and he needs some goats.
Oh my gosh, they're not for eating, they're for milking.
Yeah, he doesn't want them. He just wants the ag.
Yeah, oh yeah, so
What's your
let me
name?
give you
Daryl?
let me give you my card.
Yeah, give me your card. I'm gonna rent it. I do.
Yeah.
So now it just feels better than it's like.
Now we know where to go.
But whenever I meet somebody from the South, I always talk about how similar the cultures are.
Don't you think?
Yeah,
Thank you.
because it's like there's two different cultures, right? Like in the American South, black and white, and then here there's like
Hawaii.
local and like mainlanders
Yep.
who come to visit. Like they both somehow can't survive without the other. There's like a dialect. There's a food culture.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful women everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like in the South. I'll never forget when I went to Ole Miss and all these like gorgeous girls
Oh, I
like
know.
running with makeup on. You know what I mean?
Isn't that so well?
Yeah.
Did you ever know anybody that went to the web school in Bell Buckle? It's not real far, but that's a southern school that's a feeder for some of the higher level schools in the south, and that's where my family went. Not me, because I lived on the other side.
You went to UT.
Yeah, I actually went to the University of Texas at Austin. My father went to University of Tennessee. So.
I wanted to go to Baylor so bad.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness, my cousin went there.
Yeah.
Well, now that you see Joanna Gaines and Chip.
Oh, now everybody
tearing up
knows
the
about
turf.
Waco.
I know, right? Nobody knew
Yeah, but
about
at the
it.
time, I wish I had gone. Well, I couldn't get into Vanderbilt, but I would have loved to have gone to Baylor.
Oh, yeah. My uncle
I'm gonna,
went, I spent my entire childhood in the hospital at Vanderbilt. So
Oh, you did.
practically, no, it was ridiculous, but every Christmas was a surgery, and so it's like I spent more time at Vanderbilt than I spent in my hometown.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so funny because I miss the South so much, and I
know.
want to do what we call a Southern picnic in Austin. We used to do for people who were Southern, you know, we would do just a joking mint juleps and potluck where everybody who was originally from the American South,
Yeah.
North American South would come and just share a regional dish of their own.
Yeah.
And we did that in Austin for years, every year, something like around July 4th or something.
Yeah, you know, when I lived in DC for like 15 years, a ton of Southern people go
Right, yeah.
to DC.
I don't think of DC as Southern, but some people do.
Yeah.
'cause, yeah, Mason-Dixon.
Yeah, a Mason-Dixon thing. And Maryland is not Southern.
Right, I know.
But people claim it. But they would have the Southern
Yeah.
picnics,
will be.
and it was good food.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
We should talk, but anyway, I'll
Yeah,
touch
we'll
base
bring
with you
chicken
about-
spaghetti and stuff.
All right, let's just finish this up. So you get the idea about the coordination of the closing timeline here and having to work with the lender to get the dates right. So, and some lenders are really easy, like you'll do deals with Brady Spangler and, you know, or Movement Mortgage, and they're gonna get you final loan approval in 15 days. They're just like, and now you can see, like, you need to stop them. You need to manage the lender and go, no, please don't. I don't want it that early, and here's why, and da-da-da-da-da, you know, so we have to work with our lenders. The more you communicate with them, the better it is. Okay, next is the seller's obligation to disclose. And we have that filled in, that the seller is obligated to submit the seller's disclosure to the buyer within 7 days from acceptance. And then the next section that pertains is I-2, which says if the seller has newly discovered information from whatever they might find out. Now the reality is here, the seller isn't going to make any investigations at this point. The seller isn't reading the homeowner documents, isn't having an inspection done, isn't doing any of that. The seller is doing the survey and the termite inspection. And if there are issues with either of those items, that would be a reopening of the seller's disclosure, meaning there's new information, the buyer gets another chance at thinking about this property because this is new information. This particular paragraph is mostly about, I-2, is mostly about stuff that goes wrong with the property while it's in escrow. So if all of a sudden his wife took a bath and overflowed the bathtub and caused a flood in the bathroom, and it leaked downstairs into the family room and whatever, and some of the bedrooms, and just made a god-awful mess, you've got to disclose that as soon as possible. And the thing to do is to disclose it quickly as opposed to just remediating it, because the buyer might have a great idea or suggestion as to what to do in this instance. Like, don't bother putting the carpet back, just tear it out. I hate the carpet down there, I'm going to replace it anyway. Don't bother drying it. Yeah, just take it out. That might be the buyer's answer, right? So it's always worth to consult. Also, the buyer has a right to now take a look at what are you doing to remediate this, because water damage means mold. So now, how is this mold remediation or prevention going to be dealt with, right? So who's being brought in to make this repair? So if the seller says, oh, I took care of it, how did you take care of it? You need to show receipts for having brought in a professional at this point who knows how to take care of that and make sure there's no mold going to happen. Make sense? Yeah. So the seller has, according to our contract, 4 days to tell you if something went wrong. I don't know why it would take the seller 4 days to tell us that. That never made sense to me. But that is the fastest that any of the other brokers were willing to put this number on here. So 4 days it is. Still pretty fast. And then the next paragraph says, I-3, that the buyer has rights and obligations when they receive a disclosure statement. And the first obligation is that they have to provide a receipt within 3 days. And just so you understand, getting that receipt signed and back to the seller is really important. The courts want to make sure that there's a receipt signed so nobody can say, well, I didn't get it on time. Nope. Let's get a receipt signed. Let's make sure that this seller, or this buyer, acknowledged that they got a disclosure statement. And then we give our buyers 7 days to review the disclosure statement. It's a 4-page document, and it's got a lot of little lines. You want to open one up. You can get one right in the forms section here and print one out for yourself and read through it. And it's somewhat informative. And then there's some questions back and forth. But if something happens to the property and it's later along the way, now the buyer is given 15 days to review that. So why do you think later on the buyer would be given more time on later discovered information as opposed to the full seller's disclosure? Well, if it needs remediation, right? Or, to bring in a contractor to find out what's it gonna cost the buyer to remediate it and,
Bids and stuff.
get bids and get more information, exactly. So, same thing, if the buyer, now we're moving on to section I-4, if the buyer discovers information when they're having their inspection done that the seller didn't disclose, the seller didn't even know about it, and the buyer discovers it and it's a big deal, now they get 15 days from the day of discovery. So here's how this works. I like these timeline things, you can tell, right? All right, so we've got day 1 and to day 14, the buyer has a right to do an inspection. And let's say their inspection happens at day 8, and on that day, the inspector tells them, oh my gosh, all of the posts underneath the deck are rotted. The whole underside of the deck needs to be replaced. Like, it looks great from the top, but big deal, right? It's a big deck, goes halfway around the house, whatever it is. So now the buyer technically only has 6 days to do some investigation there. That's not a lot of time to bring contractors in. I've been trying to get a contractor. If anybody knows somebody who could build me a deck, I can't find anybody to even answer my phone calls. So now the seller's disclosure paragraph, however, says, oh no, you've got 15 days. So from 8 plus 15 gives me to day 22. 8 plus 15, what is that? 18, 23. To day 23. So I just bought my buyer a whole bunch of extra time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how most of this happens. Sometimes the inspection happens way up here, and then the 15 days only takes you an extra day or two, but he has, the buyer has plenty of time, right? So it's really just about when it's discovered. It could be something that the buyer did their inspection, the buyer asked to go to the property to measure, and in measuring, who knows, they discover something that they didn't see before that was totally material to them. It could happen here, and it'll give them 15 days. Okay? So that's the value of making that number of days 15 and allowing our buyers the time to meet with contractors. Often these things are roof related. Roofers are hard to get to come and give you quotes and make repairs. So you want to have some time. Okay. The remedies I-5 simply says that if the seller doesn't provide a buyer's disclosure statement, then the seller has the option not to purchase the property. But you would have known that going in. So your buyer, should you advise a buyer not to buy something where there's no seller's disclosure statement? No, because you buy a bank-owned property, there's going to be no disclosure statement. You buy a property from an estate, and the owner died, and the kids haven't been to the property in 10 years, or whatever it is, right? Nobody knows anything about this property. No, it's okay. Have the buyer do their home inspection and learn what they can from a home inspector, and on you go. You do the best you can. I've had buyers take over houses that had all sorts of stuff go wrong, and they had a seller's disclosure statement. So there's no guarantee, right? Yeah. These are not guarantees, that's the point. Okay, here's a whole section of general disclosures. I want to make you aware that we have something called the Buyer's Disclosure Form in our intranet. And the Buyer's Disclosure is a wonderful reminder, especially for newer agents, to talk about things with their clients. It also lets you have the conversation right up front about, will you be wanting to hire a home inspector? Will you be wanting to have anything else inspected on this property, right? And here are some specifics. It talks a little bit about vacation rentals and what's required on vacation rentals. It talks a little bit about CPRs, because CPR properties are a thing here, right? And So it's good to know the pros and cons of that and what to warn people about. So take a look at that disclosure. That goes hand in hand with these disclosures. And these disclosures start with government and private restrictions. So the property is subject to all applicable federal, state, and county laws, statutes, regulations, codes, ordinances, rules, blah, blah, blah. Right? So, okay, we all know that. And here is building permits. So not to be lost in the fray of government regulations, but does the property have its complete building permits? And just want to be clear here, you understand that this portion of the house does not have any building permits. It was built without permits, right? By the way, we have a lot of that here, but there's a lot of that everywhere. This happens everywhere. This isn't just Maui. It isn't just on Maui that people decide to add a little something to their house and not get a permit for it, right? So it's not uncommon.
Do people generally who are getting financed have to go through resolving those permitting issues?
No, it depends on the appraisal. So if the appraiser gave sufficient value to the property so that it appraised and the price is okay, that's fine. If the appraiser said, no, this property isn't worth that much because that is not permitted and I can't give it that amount of value, now you're gonna have a potential issue. And so sellers would know that. Sellers, if it's gonna be that big of a deal as part of the whole transaction, they would be aware of that, and they would probably say something somewhere in the contract, buyer agrees to buy this property regardless of the appraisal. And a buyer may be willing to sign that or not, right? So, and if a buyer has a lot of cash, it usually works out. So that's permits. Asbestos disclosure, asbestos would be at something built before 1979, and asbestos comes in 3 places predominantly. Wraps around water heaters, and at this point most of those have been taken away because the water heater's been replaced since then, right? But could still be. Old linoleum and popcorn ceilings. Now, not all popcorn ceilings have asbestos. One doesn't equate to the other, but they often do. The thing about asbestos is, if you don't disturb it, it's fine. If you don't mess with it. So the thing to do about the linoleum floor is just lay whatever flooring you're going to put here on top of it. If you don't scrape it up, if you scrape it up, you're going to have an asbestos removal hazmat thing going on. If you want the popcorn ceiling, you could have it tested, or your buyer needs to find out, is that, how do I get this painted? And there's certain products that can be painted on top of asbestos popcorn ceilings, but not normal paint. It's a special kind of paint that has to be used. Who knew?
Does it address that cane stuff?